These books will scare the seasonal depression out of you. Hi, my name's Elizabeth. This is Lizard's Library, my channel where I read and talk about books, and I'm so glad you're here. It's fall, y'all. Did I just say that unironically? No. I'm exclusively a vibes person. I really like when a book feels like a book. You know what I mean? I really don't read a lot of like super scary books, so it's a skinny list, but I think they're really good. And I think that if you love fall and you love reading and you're looking for the perfect book to just give off the fall vibe, I've got you covered. And keep watching. I have 7 books to talk about today, and I've decided to rank them going in order from least to most terrifying. So like starting out, you've got your like Christian girl autumn, sipping on pumpkin spice latte, reading this book, and then feeling warm fuzzy feelings and going to bed. Then at the end of the list, you've got your demented, might give you nightmares for years to come, and really kind of concerning that the author had these thoughts and put them down, you know? So let's just go through them. We're gonna ease our way into it. Starting up our list, we've got Persuasion by the lovely Jane Austen. The scariest thing about this book is that the protagonist is 29 and unmarried, which is actually quite frightening for Austen's time period and a little bit frightening in today's time period. So maybe that'll be good, spooky, scary if you're not into the actual thriller books. This is a good, cozy autumnal read. I just love this book a lot. It's actually been described as autumnal because it's set in autumn, but also fall is very much a metaphor in this book because it's very transformative. Like, it goes deep, and I'm a scholar, but I did really just love the romance. Basically, this is a second chance romance, and it follows Anne Elliot and Captain Wentworth. They fell in love when they were younger. I think she was 19 maybe, and basically he proposed to her, but she denied his she rejected him because of persuasion, because he was of a low social class, and people around her convinced her not to marry him because it would look bad. And so she rejected him, and she broke his heart, and it broke her heart too, and she still loved him. But then, 10 years later, Anne Elliot is still single, and Captain Wentworth comes back. He like left for a minute, he comes back, and he's now of a higher status, and she still loves him, and he kind of still loves her, but he's very hurt by her, and he thinks that she hates him, and she thinks that he hates her, but they both kind of love each other, and it's really frustrating, but it's also kind of tragic and beautiful, and it's a slow burn. It's so good. I think now would be the perfect time to read this book. The next book is a little bit scarier. The Idiot by this author, whose name I don't really know how to pronounce. I think it's fall because it is set at a school, so back to school vibes. I just really wanted an excuse to talk about it because I really loved this book. I read a Goodreads review about this book, and I think this person put it perfectly, and they basically said, to be a college freshman is to know nothing, but to think you know everything, and to be surrounded by people who are just as lost and confused, but pretend to be super confident and secure. And that's a pretty scary thing, honestly. Being a college freshman, terrifying. Couldn't be me. It was fun, loved it, absolutely could never do it again. Also, this is one of Phoebe Bridgers' favorite books, and she's the queen of fall girl music. And I think this book is perfect to read when you feel overwhelmed and need a reminder that nobody really knows what they're doing. And it will comfort you like a Thanksgiving episode of Friends and make you laugh in a much wittier and smarter way. And I think that you should read this book sitting on campus, and you'll just look really smart and mysterious, and then Jess Mariano will fall in love with you immediately. That didn't really tell you what this book is about, but I think that's the vibe, and this video is really about vibes. This book is really about vibes. It's very much no plot, just vibes. You're just following a college freshman, and she's trying to figure it out. And aren't we all? It's so good. And it won the Pulitzer, so you should read it. Moving on. I'm trying to decide which one is scarier. Gonna go with this one. The Girls by Emma Cline. This book is scary, but it's really more unsettling, I would say. And this is just one of my favorite books of all time. Granted, I read it when I was 17, and I'm I'm too scared to reread it because I really remember loving it. And I think that it probably will hold up. I have a hard time where I read books and then love them and then later don't remember them that well, but I'm like, oh, I loved it. And then I reread them and it kind of ruins the magic. But from what I remember, I really did love this book. Also, this is getting rambly, but I made my friend read it last year and she loved it and was spooked. So I think it'll be good. I might reread it, possibly. So this book is pretty character driven. That's kind of the vibe that I like. I really like character driven novels. I really like long prose and language that is interesting. I don't know, I feel like a lot of thrillers are so plot heavy that they can get away with just sort of a straightforward writing style. And that doesn't really do it for me. I prefer writing style over plot. Back to this book. Set in 1969 in California, this follows 14-year-old Evie Boyd as she is allured by these fascinating older girls and then gets involved in a cult. So there's the spooky vibe, the cult thing. I think it's supposed to be Charles Manson. I don't know if that's ever explicitly said, but honestly, it's not really about the cult. It's about the teenage girls. It's called The Girls, obviously. It's about these young, seemingly innocent girls getting involved in something so dark. I think it's definitely slower paced, but I loved the language. I thought it was so beautifully written, and it's just such a cool concept to me. It's a little bit more subtle, but it is scary. Obviously, it's spooky because of the cult backdrop, but it also just dealt with these really interesting themes growing up and being a teenage girl and how scary that can be in of itself, but then you add this whole darker theme of obsession. I think the strength of this book is its ability to emphasize how scary and vulnerable it can be to be a teenage girl, but also the way that it draws you in and makes you relate to this main character as she is getting deeper and deeper into this dark thing. And you're like, I'm following you and I'm scared. Yeah, spooky and scary, but also kind of fun. Read it. Next, this one's really indie and underground and no one has ever talked about it before on booktube, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which you know, you've heard of. Everyone's talking about this book for a reason. So good. I did a whole reading vlog where I read this book and talked about it more in depth, but basically it is a dark academia thriller. I don't know if it's thriller actually. It follows this group of friends that's very exclusive, and one of the friends gets murdered in the first chapter, and you know who it is, and you know who did it, and you know how, but you don't know why. And so this book is really just like, again, kind of character driven. I'm sensing a theme here, but you just follow the main character Richard because he gets involved with this group and then with this murder. It's insane. Truly just like batshit crazy. Love it though. Loved the writing style. I ate it up. It's super autumnal, set at this beautiful school. It's the perfect book to read in fall and just so good and compelling. I guess it is a thriller, a psychological thriller. This book, it truly had me hooked from the prologue. The first line is, "The snow in the mountains was melting and Bunny had been dead for several weeks before we came to understand the gravity of our situation." That was kind of a short little synopsis. Suspense, drama, dark academia, good vibes, but bad vibes, but good vibes. Okay, next, I think these last books, again, the ranking is very subjective. I'm looking at them and I'm like, is that really what I decided? I guess I'm gonna do this one next, because I think this one's scarier. In the Lake of the Woods by Tim O'Brien. I actually read this book for school, in high school, in 10th grade, and was obsessed. I think this is like the coolest book that I've ever read for a class. So this book has all the perfect components of a fall book. It's set in a reclusive cabin in September. Again, it's character driven, but the main characters are John Wade and his wife Kathy. John is a Vietnam vet and he just lost the election for the US Senate. So he and his wife Kathy decide to go to this cabin in the woods to get away and recoup after this really upsetting loss. John, like I said, he's a Vietnam vet, so he has a lot of trauma. So it does discuss some gory stuff about the war and just things that he's done in his past. So I would say triggers there. It gets dark. Like I said, we're getting dark. It's escalating very quickly. So basically they're at this cabin and Kathy goes missing. And the rest of the book is trying to figure out what happened to her. But you don't ever really know. And that's not a spoiler because I'm pretty sure it tells you that early on, but basically it's this giant mystery and it presents all of these different scenarios and kind of like lays it out like a case almost, and you just sort of have to like read each possible thing that could have happened to Kathy. And as much as it is about the mystery of what happened to Kathy and where she went, it is also a study of trauma and loss and how these things are intertwined and how they affect our main character, who is also an unwell person. So if not having the specific answer like spelled out for you, if that upsets you, then you might not love this one. But I really loved it and I thought that it was written so beautifully and it's just so interesting because all the different scenarios are equally convincing. This book will have you thinking all the way through and well after you finish it. So good. So that one's sort of a mystery, I would say. Okay, we've got another book that I'm sure you haven't heard of, but it is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. This book is truly frightening. I thought it was so scary and unsettling, and I feel like it's best to go into it not really knowing anything or not really knowing like what to expect. It's scary and unsettling and confusing and mysterious, and it just has all of those like spooky vibes, but it's also just like your mind is just kind of like, what? You will be scared, but you won't know why. It says it on the back, and that is true, but once you do know why, your mind will be blown and you'll want to read it all over again. So basically it follows a couple who is driving in the middle of the night to, I think, the boyfriend's parents who live on a rural farm like in the middle of nowhere, and you follow the girlfriend's point of view, and at the beginning she says, I'm thinking of ending things, and it just sort of follows her mindset of thinking that she wants to break up with this boyfriend who she's driving with to go meet their parents like currently. But it's so unsettling and creepy. It's a super quick read, very suspenseful, and I think it's really worth the hype, so you should check it out. Okay, lastly, we've got what I think is the scariest book on this list. Okay, so I actually don't have the copy of this book, but I do have this one, which is Gone Girl. Now, I have not read Gone Girl because I've seen the movie, and the movie was so good. I watched it, I didn't know it was a book. I found out it was a book, I was so mad. I was like, I want to read that book, but I already knew. So here's what I'm going to tell you. Gillian Flynn is an amazing author, and I think you should read all of her books. But the one that I want to talk about is Dark Places. And the title is very fitting because that book is so dark. It's like so dark, and it also made me a little concerned for Gillian Flynn because I was like, how does somebody come up with all of this? Like, is she okay? I don't think so. Should somebody go do a wellness check on Gillian Flynn? Like, is she good? I'm concerned. This book is like really scary and kind of gory, so if you're not into that, maybe skip it. I don't really like gore. Basically, our main character is Libby Day, who when she was 7 years old survived as her family was all brutally murdered, and then she accuses her brother Ben of being the murderer, and he gets sent to prison for like 20 years. So that happened. Now an adult, Libby is very dysfunctional and very obviously still traumatized by this loss. She never really overcame it, and she's sort of suffering still. And one of the ways she still suffers is financially because she can't keep a job. So she agrees to, like, this murder club reaches out and wants to do another investigation, and they say they'll pay her, so she agrees to help them. And then she gets involved again in investigating this really traumatic thing that happened to her in the past. So it's told through 3 different perspectives. You follow Libby, who in the current day is trying to work through this thing that happened in the past, and then you also get the mother's point of view, Patty Day, back when it happened, and shows her perspective and her fear and concern for her son who is growing up and kind of freaking her out. And then you also also get the son's perspective, the brother who has been accused and has been in prison this whole time, Ben. Back in the day, you get his perspective, like in the days leading up to the murder, and it's very creepy and very unsettling, and I thought it was so spooky and scary, but also shocking, and very much kept me on my toes, kept me thinking. I didn't know what was gonna happen next. It was mysterious and creepy and gory, and I loved it. The characters are unlikable, and the setting is dismal, but the story is so compelling, and Flynn is an excellent writer. Yeah, those are all of the spooky themed books that I personally have enjoyed. If you know of more that you think I would like that sort of have this same vibe, please let me know, because I love the idea of scary books. I really love all of these books. They're just so hard. It's so hard for me to find ones that I like because I'm pretentious, but I really want to read more this season, and I do have some on my TBR that I'm excited about. But yeah, I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you got some good book rec. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time.